Blu Murray is the editor of one of the most unlikely hits of the year. I'll say that because movies about flight disasters usually are disasters at the box office. And Sully, the Tom Hanks movie, which is Blu's film, is now at 124 million. This is a bona fide hit. How did this break the curse?
I think people wanted to see this movie because, especially for New York, it was a moment in their history where there could have been a tragedy, but there wasn't, and everybody lived, and it's a story where kind of everything goes right. You know, you have a pilot who had been trained his whole life for this moment, and he was there, and even though he was supposed to do other things, he was supposed to go back to LaGuardia, he just instinctually did what he believed to be right and saved everyone. So I think it's an uplifting story, even though, you know, it's about a plane crash and everything like that. I think it resonated with people.
And it's a Clint Eastwood film. You've been
Yes.
a pal of Clint's for a while. You've done many of his movies. How many?
I've worked with Clint in his cutting room for 12 years now.
Wow.
And 4 years before that in sound.
It is often, probably to the point of cliche, said about Clint that he's a one-take shooter and that he just does one take, move on, one take, move on. And is that really true or not?
He doesn't shoot as much as I'm sure some people shoot, but he loves to be there with the actors, and he's there in that moment, and he has one camera for most scenes, and he's in it, and when he feels that he has the moments that he wanted to capture, he'll say, all right, that's enough of that, and we'll move on. So it's not one take, it's not too bad, but when you have Tom Hanks and Aaron Eckhart, I mean, one take might do it.
But isn't that your ultimate terror, in that you have fewer alternatives when you've got to chop up all this stuff in the editing room?
Yeah, it's interesting when you're trying to move scenes around or figure things out later in the cutting room to not have footage, but it really wasn't a problem on Sully. I mean, we had everything that we wanted, and I had really great producers with me in the room, and Clint, who the first cut was 92 minutes, and Clint walked into the room and he was like, all right, let's run this thing. How long is it, 3 hours? And I said, no, it's 92 minutes. And he's like, oh, okay. And then we went from there, and he was really into the idea of having a 90-minute film. So moments where I wanted to, like, you know, extend the film, or shots that I wanted to use to set up a location or something, he said, no, it's not essential to this story, get rid of it, and we just moved on like that.
He stripped a lot of stuff away. There's not a lot of music in this movie, is there? There's some. I mean, it's not bombastic kind of action movie kind of music.
Yeah, it's always a mystery what Clint's going to do with music, because he's a musician himself and he likes to write a lot of the scores to his films. So he came in one day and he said, you know, I was thinking, High Plains Drifter, I had this woman's voice, a high-pitched woman's voice that went throughout the movie, and it really reached out to me. I'm thinking about doing something like that on this. And I said, oh, okay, interesting. And then I went home and watched High Plains Drifter again and kind of, you know, figured out what he was going for. And then a few days later, he brought in this jazz band, the Tierney Sutton Band, and ran the film for them, knowing that he was going to use her voice as kind of like the score and them to score the movie.
How big was the band? 4 or 5 people, or 10 or 20? Or?
Yeah, 3, 4,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So give us a few more stories. This is great to get an inside peek at the making of a Clint Eastwood film.
What would you like to know?
Here's the chief question of this movie. All right, you get this script. It is about something that is essentially unfilmable. I mean, how do you handle a plane landing on water, and it is meant, according to the rules of physics, to break up and splatter all over the place, but somehow miraculously doesn't, and you're supposed to find that.
Yeah, I think Clint was drawn to that aspect of it because he was in a water landing himself. He went down in a fighter jet up the coast of Northern California, landed in the water, and had to swim miles to shore. And so I think that connected him to the story. But what really drew him to the story the most was the persecution of Sully by the NTSB. he kept saying, why do we want to make this movie? Everybody knows what happened. Everything's okay. Where's the conflict? And then once he started realizing that these people were trying to prove that he did something wrong, even though he saved everybody's life, you know, he was drawn to that, like the underdog story. Here's a man who just was doing his job. He did everything right, and now they want to prove that he did something wrong and put him responsible for the crash.
Tom Hanks delivered that very understated. I mean, a righteous hero like that is allowed in a film to really have a grandstanding moment, and he didn't go for it. He went for the understatement, right?
Yeah, it was funny. We shot the stuff in New York first, so we're shooting plates, and I'm getting footage that's essentially unusable at the moment because I can only use it once we come back to LA and shoot in Falls Lake with the plane and the passengers and everything. So I'm slowly watching the footage come in, and then we shoot Tom and Aaron in the cockpit together all the way through, and it's very understated between both of them, and I'm wondering, how is there going to be something compelling or emotional, with them just being so understated? But then as the story develops and you're watching it and you're putting it all together, what they did was really magical and pretty special.
How much of a movie is reimagined in the editing room in terms of a percentage? I know it's probably different from every film, but isn't it often or sometimes the case that you start with one movie and in the editing room you end up with a different one?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first film I've cut, so I've heard that's the case. But with Clint, he really just goes with his gut, and he falls in love with the script, and he shoots that script, and that's the story he wants to tell, and we don't really mess with that in the cutting room too much. And the script was so good, and it was so moving, and it had an energy of its own, so I just wanted to pace the film, in that way, and stay true to the script.
And it's probably resonating so powerfully because, as you mentioned earlier, it's about heroes at a time when the nation is looking for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, here you have a guy who was just, he was there, he was doing his job, and in seconds he's put in a circumstance where 154 people's lives are at stake. And they were depending on him to do the right thing, and he did.
How much green screen gets involved here, and how much are you involved in that decision of what gets faked and what gets shot for real?
I'm not involved too much. Clint has his crew. They've worked with him for a long time. They all know the drill. It's a very quick set. And in this, we shot on the Hudson River. We had a barge in the middle of the Hudson, and we shot, the city and the water, and we had some passengers in the foreground. And then the rest of that was shot at Falls Lake at Universal Studios, and we had a blue screen that wrapped around that. So everything with the passengers in the plane, we shot there.
How long, time-wise, from when the camera started to when it stopped, in terms of time on the calendar?
Clint shot this film in 39 days, and 4 of those days were strictly plate shots.
And how much time in the editing room? For you?
Well, it's really cool because I'm actually on for casting, so I run all of the auditions for Clint, and I'm there with his casting director, so I get to do my research and really, become part of the story. And so I was probably on this a full year from casting to finish.
And is most of the team remote? You were saying before we started here tonight that your cinematographer was across the country or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, just on location, we shot in New York and Atlanta on this movie, and then here in LA at Falls Lake.
So is that a problem, dealing with, it's not movie making the old-fashioned way, everyone's not in the barn putting it on the show, everyone's scattered around the world, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, our cinematographer, Tom Stern, and I are in touch. We text each other every day, so when dailies are coming in, I'm letting him know what's looking good, what we might need, and he's right there with Clint, so it's pretty easy.
What scenes are you proudest of for yourself that you say, Oscar voters, Guild voters, look at that. That's where I nailed it.
For me, it won't be too exciting. I'm most proud of the quiet moments in the movie when Sully and Skiles are walking down the street in New York trying to just figure out life after they've landed on the Hudson and dealing with the pressure of the investigation and just surviving something like that, or when they're sitting in their hotel room, you know, by themselves trying to deal with what's in their head. Those are the moments that I like the most. And then there's one, I mean, Tom Hanks is so amazing. There's one push in on him in the NTSB investigation where he's giving a speech saying that we all did this, and I mean, I couldn't even cut away from it. It was so powerful. So that's one of my favorite moments too in the film.
So he was a good boy during I remember at the New York Film Critics Circle Awards many years ago, he won Best Actor for Castaway, and he told all of us in the audience, I won't use the word he used, but a real SOB on set, because I was the worst I've ever been. And he was laughing, but I got a sense, as all of us did in the room, that he was only half kidding. Was he difficult?
No, not at all. Tom was awesome, and he loved being there with Clint, and the two of them would joke around, but he's so good. There wasn't a take of his that I couldn't have put in the film, and it would have fit in naturally. Like, just watching the dailies of Tom Hanks was something special for me, especially the first film I'm cutting. I have Tom Hanks and Aaron Eckhart. It was a pretty cool experience.
And it turns out to be a mega hit besides.
Yeah, that helps.
So what's next?
I don't know. I'm taking a little time off, and Clint's reading a couple scripts, and we'll see what he does.
Okay, well, good luck.
Thank you.